Morena te whanu, mino i tātou. I ngā mano a tēnei te whakahui mea tutu ki a koe mo tēnei hui ngā mātou. Arahina mai ki au ki te tika, ki te puni a mātou. Tuku mai tō wairua tapu hei manaki, hei awhi, hei te aki hoki a mātou. Nei mātou e tuohu nea mui tō aruaru, a ka tuku i tēnei inoi i rongi i te ngō tō mātou kai whakaore i Ukraiti. Amen.
Thank you for that. Welcome everyone. It's always good to catch up after we've had a little downtime in July. I hope everyone has got their running shoes on, stretched, ready for a sprint to the end of the year. It's lovely that everyone is back. I do have apologies for Councillor Ria and Councillor Robinson, and I have apologies for lateness for Councillor Thompson and Councillor Parata. Do I have a mover? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga. Thank you, Councillor Foster. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. So welcome to our Finance and Performance meeting today. We also have an extraordinary council meeting later. Today is going to be short. As you can see, we've got nice short agendas. Famous last words. Sometimes we have huge agendas and then we're here for 1 hour, and then sometimes we have tiny agendas and we're here for a long time. But let's get cracking. In our Finance and Performance, I'm going to take you to our minutes, page 5. Have a look. You have had the opportunity to have a look because Annie sent them out in the week. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Telfer. Can I take that this is a fair representation of what was discussed at the meeting? All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Next, we take a look at our action sheet. So that is still in progress. Oh yes, it's
that's just updating the presentation from the action will be in the first quarter of this financial year.
Thank you. And then just our governance work plan for the rest of the year, what we were discussing, what is on our agenda, what do we need to attend to. Lots of work ahead of us. Okay, councillors, I take you to page 13. That is our first report. That is our Treasury report. And I'll hand over to Pauline. Thank you, Pauline.
So this, just to give the two reports are reporting to the full year results, the 30th of June, because we've got basically cash that you can report up to the 30th of June. The financial report, which is the third report, goes to the 31st of May because we're still in the accruals and the end of the year process. So it's just a look, making sure that you know what you're understanding. So the Treasury report is putting on the full year results. What it is saying in this particular case, we have a number of policies, Treasury policies that are based on prescriptive and also PwC, and one of them that says that it is slightly out of policy, and that refers to the out of policy where you have any one institution for either the swaps, which are the liabilities kind of elements that you have with one institution, and your deposits. So they take them together and they said, yeah, the maximum that you have for any one of those institutions is 25 million. And it says it's slightly out as at the 30th of June because we had deposits relating to ring fencing money that we had received for the woody debris. And so it said with ANZ, that is 27 million. And as it said, it was slightly for a temporary period, that it was out in July, it's back in policy. So it just refers to what it is, why we're doing, and in terms of going with that ring fencing it from one particular institution for that amount of monies was best to go with ANZ, but it was a temporary situation at the end of the financial year. The others that it refers to and the risk, what is the risk associated with it? Most of the risk when you talk about it is having a lending institution with the liability kind of component, which is the counterparty, and the liability is your kind of your swaps, which is counterparty situation. And in this particular case, most of it wasn't with the liability, it is only with the deposits that we've got with ANZ, money that we bank with it. But basically, this is the kind of position, what we are with your net debt, where you are with at the end of the financial year. Happy to take any questions. That was the primary why it's a decision paper, just to acknowledge that it's out of policy, we're not going to do anything about it. It's a temporary situation.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, I am just a little bit confused. You are telling us that this is money that is deposited in a bank account, so we actually have put it, we've got too much money in the bank.
Yes.
And I see there's currently two banks, and it's with the mention of opening another account with the BNZ. So why a limit on how much can be with each bank? What's that about?
So we take our advice, it's diversification, so you don't have it all with one bank. And the diversification is on the advice of PwC. So if anything happened to any one particular institution, you're better to actually don't have all your eggs in one basket and just spread it across, regardless of it. And it takes it, regardless of it's a deposit and money in the bank, or swaps, which is basically an insurance hedge. It's still saying that the maximum amount that they would recommend is around 25 million per banking institution. So yes, it's just our internal policies that we have, and they're the guidelines that it is recommended from it. We've said to PwC, because of that, said this is kind of unusual, we don't usually have money in the bank, and would it be better to have separate deposits limits as opposed to the liabilities? And they said, well, we would just recommend you keep it under one bucket at 25.
Thanks, Rick. So that on page, the graph with the yellow is showing these are the funds that are unspent.
Which page?
Page 18. The graphs with the yellow is presumably unspent money, which is also mentioned further on in the Treasury. If there's any savings, also mentioned on page 22, the Woody Debris Fund. This ring-fenced fund, if there's any savings in the spend, does that have to be given back, or
So there's two things on page 18 with the top graph, and there's a picture of the available funds. What that means is we have facilities, just like you can borrow from yourself from the bank if you had overdraft facilities, and that's 35 million, and it's saying there we've got 35 million to draw down, but we haven't drawn down. So it's just that's just the availability of what we can borrow at any particular time and how it falls within over the years. So that's the first part. The second part is if we've money that is particularly given to a grant for a particular purpose, is ring fenced for that purpose, and if we did not use it, we would have to give it back. Any more questions?
I'm happy to move the paper.
second it?
All in favour? Aye. Very carried. Okay, next paper, which is our rates and sundry invoice debt management to the end of our financial year. That's page 23.
I'm happy to take any questions with regards to this. This is probably, as you say, quarterly, you see what the debt is and when we're reporting at a particular period in time. Happy to take any questions with regards to any.
Councillor Cranston, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Sundry debt, which is page 25. Yeah, so it's 916, which is an increase in 269. Be interested to get a breakdown on that, mainly because one of the elements of sundry debt is listed as grants, and I assume grants is grants we've got money for, but we haven't paid it out yet. So is that right? And if it is they're quite a significant part of that, I wouldn't be so as concerned.
Sure. So on page 34,
Yep.
34 is basically where the sundry debt lies in terms of the sort of activities. And if you look on page 34, it says environmental services and protection, which is perhaps the biggest amount of the sundry debt, which is 521. And in that, it's mostly resource consents, and some of that resource consents is a kind of a timing issue, in that you are intending to do work and you can pay, the invoice is issued virtually up front, and so therefore the work may not have been completed for a period of time. So some of that is those timing issues, and that's what they're referring to, is around about 10 is timing issues, and some of them may be in dispute, and also because of the timing of you initially put it up front, but the work hasn't been completed.
And grants, is that?
Not that much in grants in this particular case. Sometimes there are grants.
It's grants we're paying out and we haven't as yet on the date.
No, in this particular one, it's grants owing to us.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, that would be grants that there's council we've issued, but we haven't received the money for. But in this particular case, at the 30th June, there is an awful lot of grants that are outstanding. The bulk of the difference, if you like, is within the resource consents area.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Page 33, the graphs, general land age rate step for June close quarter. I just note on the year 23-24, we've got a big increase in blue, and yet the penalties are actually pretty well insignificant compared to the others. So we changed our routine on penalties. Can I have a little bit of explanation on that? And then I've got another question after that.
So the first thing is, it is always very confusing when you're looking at that, because what that's trying to say is, yes, you've got 4.1, and if you look on the left-hand side, general land, and the first graph that you have is of the general land age debt, rates debt for the quarter. But what it's saying is that most of the debt is due in this financial year, which you would expect, because it could be 1 month, it could be 2 months, so it is within that particular area. So I wouldn't be alarmed with that. What you would be more alarmed is what, the debt that's from the previous year and the years after. So yes, you would expect most of the debt to be due, as saying 23-24. Penalties, there was a change in the penalties in terms of P2, but it's not really affected in that. This would just be the normal. P2 is a penalties. First penalties, if you haven't paid by the 20th of month, you get the penalties applied. It's the only time of penalties that we apply now. Before, there are penalties when, if it's in a haven't paid at the end of the year, you'd also get hit again. We stopped doing those kind of penalties. So that's the only type of change to where we've done with the penalty. So it's just as it comes due.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, just because we're on the graph, there's a huge increase compared to the other years, especially at the end on the last graph, total age rates for June. Yeah, but anyway, okay. The other question is in the graph underneath, the purple, where it's got postal mailing address. I think we've talked about this before, but the general land one is quite insignificant, and the Māori freehold one is absolutely huge. So at the end, it makes that whole thing huge when you've got the total of a combination of the two. So we don't do. There's no postal communication now, surely.
Yes, there is. That required. I'll just get Fiona to can probably, if you want to, as well, if you like, and then we can answer. But we do have to. People can sign up for the electronic invoices, but the majority still are sent out invoices by mail.
Right. So when I look at this, it indicates that there's been no response from a huge amount of the community. No response whatsoever.
In response to that, what that reflects is that we've got some areas of Māori freehold land where we don't have enough information from owners posting it, so we're sending the invoices out, but they're being returned because there's we've got no contact details. So that's what that mainly reflects. And what we do is we go through and try, look at electoral rolls and other information and try to get contact details for those blocks. They're often blocks of land that they're just vacant, bare land. So
is this a big increase from previous year? Because we've got
no, it isn't an increase from previous years. And what we're doing is we're trying to reduce it, and where we can look at some of these ones, because some of them should be possibly made non-rateable, not being used. And so we're going through that process with owners as well. And so some of those would be blocks that would be, need that kind of activity. But we endeavour to try and contact the owners where we can, but we don't always have that information. Often the postal address is just the block of land which has got no one on it. So but by law we have to send the invoices out to be able to collect any money.
Okay, thank you.
Just showing we've got total debt of 9 million, it's increased 700,000. I'm just wondering if that 700k is from the same properties adding up, or if there's new properties to that, or what the mix is.
It's a bit of both, but mostly there is some new properties that have been that you're starting to see in general land that you wouldn't have normally seen, and that's where it is mentioned, and I'm just trying to find it, that general land debt has increased mostly in residential, commercial and the industrial sectors, which is under point 15, and it says that actually in the last 2 years that's in alignment with COVID, with some of the business impacts and the impacts to businesses, and then there was a spike in the rates debt as part of last year's weather events.
So what percentage would be existing and what percentage new? Is the bulk of that 700k new, or is the bulk existing ones just ticking over again?
The only way you'd probably be looking at it if you were saying 27, the graph, the bottom blue line goes from 4.9 to 5.5. In terms of that, you're starting to say there's new stuff. The increment has gone up about 1.1 from 2022, 1.1% increase, and of that debt is probably about, I would think about 400k.
And is there a general reason it's harder times?
Yeah, I think so.
Any more questions? Councillor Alder.
Page number, point number 9 on page 26, the Sundry debt trend. So, does this mean that the 20 current year?
Only if it's uncollectible. So in terms of that, if we are depending on what it is, so there's a definition, statutory badge can't collect it, so it's after that period of time. So if we believe we still can pursue some of that and get it without kind of using third-party debt collection, we would still pursue it. So for argument's sake, general land, if you sell a property, the rates debt that's on that can be deducted from the purchase price, and so that's really not deemed uncollectible. So you'd be case-by-case basis.
Okay. So then leaping to page 30, your budget for rate remissions of 1.54 million. Now, presumably the government reimburses remissions. Do they reimburse write-offs?
So there's two things. There's rebates, where the rebates, which is mentioned, and remissions is councils. Okay, if you think of remissions as a discount. Rebates is a central government under paragraphs 28 to 32. That's definitely, or you have a maximum amount. If you can apply for it, you have all those claims and conditions, you can get that through. But in terms of remissions and write-offs, that's on council.
So do you think your budget on line 40 of 1.54 million, do you think you're going to go over that budget?
In terms of, we hit it because this is the 30th of June. Next year, when we said we increased it. We increased it because we knew that was not everybody can pay the same, and that we needed to increase that to acknowledge that there were different circumstances for different people.
Right. I think on the graph on page 27, would it be possible to put a remission line and a write-off line on that same graph at some future day? Just to see the trends of remissions and write-offs over the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
It would just make it easier to read. And last question on page 30, the 1967 land district thing. Do we have an idea of how many hectares are involved?
Look, I don't know off the top of my head, but what happened is the information that came to us from Linz included the whole Karakia Māori land district, which goes from halfway between Wairua and Hawke's Bay, right through to Opotiki and around the coast. So a lot of it is outside of our area, so we had to do all this extra analysis to remove some of that land, but I can certainly advise the area involved after we've done this last 10%. It's been a huge job, and there's been a whole lot of information that didn't necessarily belong to our district council areas. So it was a matter of eliminating it, and it was, it's been a big process, and hopefully we'll have more, we're still working on it, but we will have more information once we've done this last 10%, and yep, I can certainly report on what land area that is.
Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Morena, my apologies for lateness. I'm not sure whether or not these questions have already been asked.
All right, give it a
Ask
go.
them and you can tell me if they have been. Just on page, just there. 28. At the top of page 28 is about Māori freehold land, specifically. Oh, it's previous paper.
You're right, we're still on page 28.
Paragraph 20 you're looking at. Yes, sorry. Okay, I just wanted to get get clear on that. So there's $100,000 increase in Māori freehold land there. And is that to do with whānau not being able to, like, what is that to do with? Like, why is there an increase in that? Or is it that we put rates up? Like, why, is there any analysis that tells us why there is $100,000 worth of extra Māori freehold land there?
Not as such. I mean, 100,000, yes, there was some write-off and things that were uncollectible. It would be the same trend in the general land where there was more work was done to analyse what was the particular increases, and where you see there was a spike in one particular sector over the other. But the 100,000 wasn't analysed as much. Mainly because, yes, when you have an increase in rates collected, the percentage of the debt probably follows the same some alignment, and 100,000 wasn't an awful lot. I would say that if it's going on the same trend that we saw in the general land, there is a tightening of people's ability to pay.
Can you explain point 20 to me? I've read it several times and I've read it again and don't quite understand. It's about the limitation on trustee liability. Could you just explain that to me? I don't quite understand what exactly that means.
Under the Local Government Rating Act, there's section 93, which talks about Māori land trusts, and where land is under a trust and there's no income generated from it, they only have to pay rates to the extent of income generated from that land. So basically, that 900,000 that we're talking about just sits there until it becomes statute barred, unless the trustees advise that there's an income generated on the land.
Oh, I see. So it's money we can't claim and don't try to claim.
Yeah.
Right, okay. One more question. On page 30, at point 39, about the Māori Affairs Amendment Act project, I just wanted to know if there's a timeline or an indication when that analysis might return to the table.
Well, I know that we do a follow-up report, a rates and debt report in another 6 months, so we would definitely have more information by then. It's just that we've had to stop this to do our VAU to get all our rates out for the new financial year, and that's a big process which takes us a couple of months. So we'll be getting straight back into it as soon as August is over, pretty much.
Yeah,
so.
I can completely appreciate that. I just think that this is it's an important piece of work that I think will really add value to the way that we make decisions. I'm really grateful that it's written here so that we can be prepared for when it does come. Thank you, that's my question.
Councillor Tibble.
Morena, your worship. My question catches the bus after Albania's in relation to paragraph 20, paragraph 36, 37 to 39, and comes across to looking at page 33, where we have general land graft, Māori freehold land graft, and total roads debt. In relation to the 1967 Māori Affairs Amendment Act, is any of the data that is contained in Māori freehold land in this picture still cognizant of Māori land, or is that Māori land now in the general land?
It would be in the general land because it is identified currently as general land.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I have a subsequent question too. In terms of the Māori land on this page, and comparing that with the graph on page 27, this one here, the indication of the total rates debt, if you take the middle bar, which applies to Māori freehold land, and the bottom bar, which belongs to general land, I'm wondering, from my perspective, I would like to see what that land total rateable area is in relation to Māori rates in this graphing compared to general land rates, because to me it skews the proportion of how much the whole rate of land take might be for the council in relation to Māori land. There's an assumption at that we might be dealing with apples and apples, but it's not.
If we can certainly add some information about the area of land involved.
Thank you. I'd like the contextualisation of the land mass that is rateable in these two categories of general. Thank you.
Questions or queries on this report? If not, do I have a mover? We go to page 36, which is our financial report for the end of May 2024.
So basically, as I say, this is for 11 months. We're still in the end of the financial year process. Currently, the audit is, I can't remember which day, but it's about the middle of August, September. We're doing the process. So where this is at the moment is also an indication of perhaps where we will lie by the end of the financial year. And it is saying that yes, we're expecting to be a little bit less than what we had put in the annual plan. And most of that difference relates to the Category 3 properties. And so if I take you to page 40, just so you can understand what that is and where do you see that. On page 40, you have got the list of, this is May year-to-date actuals. You've got the year-to-date budget, and over on the right-hand side, you've got the full-year budget. If you come under the expenses heading, normally we just have the first 4 categorisation of expense types: employee benefit, operating expenditure, depreciation, financing. But because it's material enough, we have put a separate line for the loss on disposal Category 3 buyouts. Now what that means is, it's an accounting recognition, is that you purchase property that relates to the market value before the reverse event, but the actual value the day after is a lot less. And so that is where we have to recognise that loss within the categories. And so you will see that, and that's why the majority of the things where we expect to be by year end is going to be less than what we anticipated, but through that accounting recognition. And we're saying probably with about 50% of the properties there, that's maybe about $8 million that you'll see as an extra a loss write-off on those particular accounts. But I'm happy to take any questions with regards to the rest of the paper. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just relating to that, actually, 42 and number 10, it kind of explains it. But so do we get reimbursed for that we're going to do because of the valuation fluctuation? Obviously, they are valued less after being hammered by a cyclone than what they were prior. But it's a strange process, really.
No, it's a valuation because we own it. Central government don't own those properties, and so that's the, if you like, they gave 50% for the market price. Then thereafter, it's because we own the assets, therefore we take it. If they own the assets, they would take the loss, but we own the assets, so therefore we take the loss.
We will obviously go about to try and sell those properties to recover some of that money.
We are working through a process of working out what we're going to do with the property, so that's the piece of work that Joe's team's working on.
Seems like a big loss, which we cannot afford.
Just a little bit of clarity on that, because it always, when I'm meeting people, they always think we're paying 50% of these properties, but we do need to state that it is 50% over and above what's been paid out of insurance. So it's a lesser figure than people think.
I was just a little bit confused on that page 42, number 10 also. Is that like a depreciation cost, so there'll be a loss every year? Because basically those houses are worse than worth nothing because we have to pull them down. So to me it's actually a bigger loss. Whatever we pay for it, we've pretty much lost the whole lot. We've nothing, we have to sell them or do anything with them. Some of them, but most of them are concrete slabs. So is that like a depreciation where there's a yearly loss, or is that a one-off loss?
So the majority of the loss, the 8 million, the big hit, will occur when we have purchased the properties. And so in the following years, the value of that property is valued down, then your depreciation costs are written down, and you only recognise the lower cost of that particular. So the biggest hit occurs when you purchase in that financial year. It's not you won't see the big losses, apart from the remaining 50% of properties that are purchased in the following year, occur once, the big loss.
So there won't be further losses as years?
No, once you've recognised it, and then every time that you revalue it, it'll be from what it was, the lower price of the property, and then it'll be revalued upwards. It will be revalued down again after that. It's because it's already reached the recognised value of that property after the so it occurs once.
So some of those properties we will look at potentially salvaging stuff out of them or shifting?
So at the moment we're going, so we've developed a tender document to go out to look at some options for us. So we're seeking pricing options for the land that we have, firstly around demolition. We have sets around what's relocatable. We also look at how we can recycle some of the materials that are there, and also repurpose for the purpose of housing and area land that we've got as well. So there are multiple number of options that we're looking for. We were always aware that this was the demolition part of the process was going to be cost incurring to council. So when we did the negotiations, we were able to include that in the co-funding share of that central government provided us. And in a lot of cases, it's more likely to be cheaper to basically demolish some of the houses, and a lot of them aren't fit for purpose because they have had a lot of damage incurred as a result of the floods. That's why
it says here that this relates to 20 properties that currently what's being settled at 6.7, but I thought we were understanding we're up to about 50 properties. And it's saying we're going to end up with 8 million. That only leaves $1.3 million for the next 30 properties. It doesn't seem way out of kilter.
That was the forecast figures that they may have. It may not be 50%, it may be the 50% by August. In July may come in for that, but what they're forecasting for settlement prices that they actually had for the 30th of June. And then you've also got to take into account, so it probably was over a 3-year period at the time of the settlements, and I'm not exactly sure what they were at the 30th of June. Joe may have better than me, but normally I would have known what it is, but they were forecasting it from over the 3 months period that you'd get to 50%, and I think more were slightly hitting into July and August, and so that 50% threshold may not actually be by the 30th of June. It might just be coming over into the new year. But and the other part of it taken into account, as was mentioned before, the loss becomes less if there is the amount that we pay for it, is just the net insurance, is then the loss is, so the property might be worth 700,000, but the insurance proceeds are paying 550,000, and so therefore we're only paying 250,000 for the remaining part, and so the loss is a lot less. And so that's where we're getting to some of these things, which are the latter part of the properties are slower, is because of the insurance proceeds are paying out. So you would expect, hopefully, that the losses for some of the others, especially with insurance, are less.
Yeah, I remember when we first looked at this proposal, the 50-50, there was a conversation around insured and uninsured properties. Looking at this now, I'd almost look at the same, the uninsured properties have been treated first. They would already be done and dusted, would that be right?
Some of them have, yes.
Yeah, so that's sort of talked about back then. It's had the potential to set a precedent that you don't want. It's almost, it's almost an incentive for you in dealt with first. And there's a lot of people dealing with insurance companies, which are, causing major hassles and long-term fighting and everything else, which should be the easiest things in principle to sort out. But the fine print's never quite what it seems. So I just, just want to make that point. We actually talked about the precedent setting and we decided to go with it, but it's probably an example of coming now where they've already done and dusted it.
Can I ask a supplementary question of Councillor Alfred just asked of the 60 houses that the property we deal with in Treasury, what percentage would be uninsured?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I can get that number to you.
But it's a tiny percentage though.
It's a relatively small percentage, yes.
Yeah. So it's only a handful.
Some houses are insured, but for some reason their insurance hasn't paid out. I mean, there's lots of variables within the insurance.
But I'm just trying to say, for myself, at the tiniest, out of the 60, it might be 5. I'm just making up the numbers, but it is a small proportion of people there were some properties whose insurance didn't pay out because they might have insurance that cover damage to the house, but there's no damage to the house, but it's moving. That is why some insurance also didn't pay out, and it is so complicated.
Yeah. Through you, it was a handful from memory.
Yeah.
I can count on one hand how many were.
Yeah. Any more questions on this paper? Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Cranston. All in favour? 3 carried. Okay, we are going to go into public excluded till 11. So we will start with our council meeting at 11. So people just want to grab a quick 5-minute copy and bring it back. We will start. Yes, so Winsley Zeta will be back at 11. What's that? 10. They come back at 11. Yeah. We're going into public excluded. I move we go into public excluded. All in favour?